Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. This week we are kicking off Season 9 with the return of a classic enemy in Day of the Daleks. We will be discussing the Doctor, the companions and the villains and giving our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on this story, so to join the discussion, you can check us out at Time Team, that's TimeTeamp, on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. For now though, Paddy, it is a new season. Can you give us our opening summary, please?
I can indeed, but before I do that, I watched Bedknobs and Broomsticks during the week, and guess who I was reminded of?
Who? What?
No. So yeah, that was very vague. When it got to the animated sequence with the king, I was reminded of Azal.
Okay, I get it now.
Stop that ball.
Okay, that makes way more sense. Because you were saying, I saw Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and here's what I reminded of, and I'm now going down through like the entire character list, being like, I don't know.
Did you eat a portobello mushroom during the week or something? Okay, now
you go.
Back to seriousness. Yeah. Episode 1. At a manor in the English countryside, a man is working at his desk when he notices the curtains move due to the open window. He goes to close them and discovers a man in camouflage gear who throws him to the ground and prepares to shoot him. However, the assassin is encased in a sphere of golden light and then disappears from sight. The man's secretary rushes in after hearing his cries and stares in confusion as the man babbles about the mysterious intruder. At Unit HQ, the Brigadier is discussing the events at the manor with the Minister of Defence. The man who was attacked was Sir Reginald Styles, a prominent representative in the UN. The Brigadier informs the Minister that he intends to send the Doctor to investigate. At that moment, the Doctor is attempting to bypass the remote control on the TARDIS's dematerialization circuit. Jo watches as he works and takes a look at some of his notes while he checks underneath the power console. She looks up when she hears the doors to the lab opening and is stunned to see both herself and the Doctor standing outside them. The other Doctor tells her not to worry, but is interrupted by his equally stunned counterpart, who demands to know how he got there. The Doctor says that two of him can't exist in the same space, and the other one tells him that things will soon sort themselves out. Suddenly, there's a flash of light and a puff of smoke from the power console, and the duplicate Doctor and Jo disappear into thin air. Jo asks what happened, but the Doctor says it would be difficult to explain and tells her not to worry as it won't happen again. The Brigadier then enters and brings the Doctor up to speed on Sir Reginald. He says that he is a key figure in the current peace summit and is the best candidate to try and bring the recently departed Chinese delegation back to the talks. He then tells him about the events of the manor, which is also the location for the peace conference. The Doctor and Jo go with the Brigadier to the manor and interview Sir Reginald and his secretary, Miss Paget. Sir Reginald seems to be in denial of what he saw and attributes it to a nightmare brought on by exhaustion from his work. The Doctor notices a pair of muddy boot prints on the floor, but Sir Reginald brushes it off and says he must leave for the airport. Before he goes, he allows the Brigadier to send his men out to search the grounds. Outside the manor, the assassin reappears in the same golden ball of light and starts to make his way towards the manor. However, he hears the sound of whistles and flees towards a nearby rail bridge. Once there, he is suddenly attacked by two large ape-like creatures in uniforms. They leave his body in the long grass and then enter the tunnel under the bridge. His body is later found by the unit troops, and the Doctor says that he is alive but in critical condition, and Yates is dispatched to organise an ambulance. The Brigadier notices his gun, which appears to be of advanced design, and gives it to the Doctor to examine it. Benton appears, carrying a small black box his men found in the tunnel. The Doctor opens it and notices the advanced circuitry inside. Meanwhile, the ape-like creatures are transported to a devastated city with alien spaceships flying overhead and enter a futuristic control room filled with human technicians and a man who is the controller of the site sitting in a chair in the centre of the room. They tell the controller they destroyed their target, but he says that they must track down the other members of his group and eliminate them as well. He then dismisses them. Back at the manor house, Sir Reginald enters his office and is startled to see the Brigadier holding the assassin's gun. Clearly disturbed by both its presence and the news of its owner, he says he must leave for the conference, and the Brigadier insists that he take a unit escort. The Doctor takes the weapon back to his lab, and after running some tests, discovers it is an ultrasonic disintegrator, and says it is far too advanced for the technology currently used on Earth. The Doctor shows them the black box Benton found, and says it is a form of time travel. He activates it, and the box is suddenly covered in a golden light. At that moment, the assassin disappears from the ambulance carrying him into the hospital, leaving Benton stunned. He reports this to the brigadier, who informs the doctor and Joe about what happened. The doctor says that the box's temporal circuit has overloaded, but says that whoever is trying to harm Sir Reginald will most likely try again, and suggests to Joe that they should stay the night in the manor. Meanwhile, the activation of the box is registered in the control room by one of the technicians, but says that they are unable to get a specific lock on it, saying that they only learned that it was used in the 20th century. Suddenly, a Dalek appears and demands a report from the controller in charge. Later that night, the doctor is helping himself to supplies from the pantry, trying to keep a nervous Joe relaxed. Outside the manor, Yates and Benton are preparing their men for any attack. Benton goes in to get some food and startles Joe, who has gone to take a look around. She brings him something to eat, but he is sent to check on the sentries by Yates, who then takes the food after he is gone, quoting the military axiom that rank has its privileges. Joe returns to the doctor and admits that her nervousness is from the doctor's analogies of ghosts when he and the brigadier were discussing the strange happenings around the manor. He tells her to go get some rest. Meanwhile, two men and a woman, dressed in the same camouflage gear as the assassin, appear near the rail bridge. One of the men starts to leave, but the woman says that they will wait until morning before going anywhere. In the morning, they kill a pair of unit sentries as they approach, and then move off. At Unit HQ, an emergency broadcast airs saying that the failure of the conference has pushed the world to the brink of war as China prepares to take on the forces of the United Nations. The broadcast also reveals that several countries in South America have used the tensions to launch their own assaults on their rival nations. Back at the manor, the trio approach the house and one of them enters the study when he sees the black box the doctor was working on glowing. He goes to retrieve it but is stopped by a returning doctor who incapacitates him with ease. He begs the doctor to turn off the box, saying that they will all die if he doesn't. The activation is again noticed in the control room, and the controller reports this to the Daleks, who order the controller to have whoever is using the box exterminated. Episode 2. The other two assassins enter the room with Joe as their hostage, and the woman orders the doctor to turn off the box. He does so, and the control room loses the signal. The controller goes to report this to the Daleks, who order him to continue the search. In the manor, the woman tells the doctor he is to be executed for his crimes, but refuses to elaborate on what they are. She reveals that they think he is Sir Reginald, and he tells her and the others about the case of mistaken identity, using a copy of the morning paper to confirm his claims. The two men, named Boaz and Shura, insist he is lying and urge the woman, who is called Anat, to kill him. However, she refuses to do so and sends Boaz to keep a lookout while she questions the doctor. The doctor tells them that he has been waiting for them to arrive so he can question them about where and when they came from. However, they are interrupted when Boaz warns them about the arrival of Benton and Yates, who have gone in to look into the house for the missing sentries. The trio take the doctor and Joe with them and bring them down into the coal cellar, whilst Yates and Benton search the manor. Joe tries to call out, but Boaz muffles her. Yates calls for the brigadier to inform him, but the brigadier hurriedly tells him to search again, as he is currently talking to the Minister of Defence about the potential conflict ahead. After Benton and Yates leave, Annette tells the others to tie up the hostages, and once they are done, to go back up into the main house. The doctor and Joe manage to loosen the gags around their mouths, and they discuss the nature of the trio and their intentions. Joe starts to work on freeing the doctor, and he says based on their weaponry they are from the 22nd century, and wonders why they have come back in time and what they want with Sir Reginald. Joe says the ropes are too difficult to undo, and so they resign themselves to wait for a rescue, whilst continuing to discuss the nature of the trio. Joe thinks their actions are thuggish, whilst the doctor thinks that they are more than that due to their almost fanatical desire to change history. In the 22nd century, the controller reports that they've been unable to track down the exact location of the signal. The head Dalek cuts across him, saying the signal will most likely have gone to the same location as where the first assassin went. It orders the controller to send security forces to the location, and also informs them about that a time vortex magnetron has been set up so that anyone using the black box will be brought to the control center instead of its normal origin point. The controller questions as to whether that is a good use for it, as those using the box will most likely realize that they have been tracked, but the Daleks tell him to obey as they activate the magnetron. Meanwhile, back in the manor house, Annette attempts to call through to her own base, but the signal is blocked by the magnetron. Boaz says that they should carry out their mission and wait to kill Sir Reginald, but Annette says that they need new orders as the situation has changed. Shura says that he will go back to the rail bridge as the signal might be better there. He makes his way back to the rail bridge, carefully avoiding the unit patrols in the area. Once there, he checks on a hidden device before putting it back. He then tries to radio through to his base, but he's attacked and wounded by one of the ape-like creatures. He shoots the creature after a brief struggle, completely disintegrating it, and then rushes back to the house. At Unit HQ, Benton and Yates inform the Brigadier about the failure of the searches. This frustrates him further as he reveals that Sir Reginald was successful in re-establishing talks and they will be held at the manor the following night. He tries calling through to the manor, and Annette tells Boaz to bring the doctor and Joe up so they can answer the call. In the cellar, the doctor has explained the rules of time travel and the effects it has on history when Boaz arrives and orders them upstairs. The doctor answers the phone and tells them that everything is okay. When the Brigadier mentions that Sir Reginald is returning to the manor, he tries to tell him not to allow it, but is stopped by Annette, and so he uses the coded message of "tell it to the Marines" to the Brigadier before hanging up. Realizing that something is wrong, the Brigadier orders the Jeep to be prepared to take him to the manor. Annette and Boaz are delighted to hear that Sir Reginald is coming, and as they gloat, Jo manages to slip free from her ropes. She picks up the black box and threatens to smash it unless she and the doctor are released. Annette says that it is pointless, as that was the one used by the earlier assassin, and that they have their own one to let them go back. Boaz threatens to kill her, and the doctor tells her to put it down, but it suddenly starts to glow, and Jo is transported to the control room in the 22nd century, where she is captured by the ape-like creatures. The controller dismisses them and tells Jo that they are called Ogrons, a primitive species from planets in the outlying solar systems that they use as security personnel. He tries to put her at ease by letting her sit down and tells her that she is lucky to be alive as the trio are deadly fanatics. He tells her that the doctor is at great risk as they and their colleagues are responsible for several atrocities. He offers to save him but needs the exact location and date in order to extract him. He sends her away to rest, but before she goes, he asks where the trio arrived and she tells him about the discovery of the first black box near the rail bridge. Once she is gone, the controller relays the information to the head Dalek, who says it will lead a security force to the rail bridge to ambush the trio, who are actually part of a guerrilla faction. Back in the manor house, the doctor is placed back in the cellar but manages to get free and makes his way back up to the study, where Nat and Boaz are currently engaged in a firefight with a squad of Ogrons that have just appeared. Boaz tries to attack the doctor, but he's easily knocked back, and Annette escapes with him. An Ogron crashes through the window of the study, and the doctor manages to disarm it, but it forces him out of the study to the grounds outside. He comes face to face with two Ogrons as they pursue the guerrillas, and he is forced to shoot one of them. The other one is killed by the Brigadier manning the machine gun on his jeep. The doctor briefly thanks him before taking off in the jeep to pursue the guerrillas. He follows them to the rail bridge and comes face to face with a Dalek. Episode 3. The doctor flees down a side tunnel as the Dalek takes off in pursuit. He encounters Boaz and Annette, who warn him to stay back, but he ends up getting caught in the time field that returns him to the 22nd century. Once they have gathered themselves, the doctor mentions his history with the Daleks and asks them the best way to find Jo. Boaz refuses to help, but Annette says that they must do something to help. Their discussion is interrupted when they hear a squad of Ogrons approaching and they flee down the tunnels, separating to avoid capture. The doctor avoids his pursuer and makes his way up to the surface. He carefully avoids the patrolling Ogrons and makes his way towards a group of buildings in the distance. In the command center, the controller reveals that the search of the tunnels has yielded no results and he is berated by the Daleks. He blames the limited intelligence of the Ogrons on the failure, as well as the fact that the Daleks underestimate the tenacity of the guerrillas. He requests to be allowed to recruit more human personnel, but he is refused, being told that humans are untrustworthy. Before he leaves, he mentions Jo talking about the doctor and states that he has arrived in their time zone. The Daleks order him to be found immediately and exterminated. At that moment, the doctor has actually made it to one of the buildings, but he does notice that he is being monitored by security cameras. His presence is related to the controller, who tells the Daleks that he will be arrested soon. He goes to leave to organize the arrest, but he is stopped by the Daleks, who tell him that the production figures from the slave workforce have decreased. He tries to tell them that the figures will be met by the next cycle, but the head Dalek informs him that the target has been increased. He objects, saying that many of the workers will die, but he is ignored and dismissed. He then returns to the control room and asks for the production figures from the various factories to be sent to him for personal review. In the guerrilla hideout, Annette and Boaz are bickering over her decision to return to the future. They are stopped when their leader Monia arrives, and he tells them about Jo's arrival in the command center and says it will only be a matter of time before the doctor is caught as well. His words prove true when the doctor is caught by an Ogron whilst he is spying on one of the factory assembly lines in the building he entered. In his private quarters, the controller is treating Jo to a banquet of food. She thanks him for his kindness, but asks him to help return her to the past. He says that his men are working on it, saying that it was a fluke that she arrived safely. He tells her about the sighting of the doctor with the guerrillas, and she offers to help him find the doctor. The controller tells her that it would be too dangerous for her, as guerrillas might think that she is a traitor. A message is brought informing them that the doctor has been found. The Doctor is actually brought to a jail cell where he's questioned by a human interrogator. He refuses to answer any questions and demands to know information about Joe. They are interrupted by another human overseer who says that he will take over the interrogation. Once the interrogator and his Ogron guards are gone, the overseer asks which guerrilla faction he belongs to, revealing himself as a double agent. The Doctor tries to explain that he is not a guerrilla, but they are interrupted by the sudden arrival of the Controller. The Controller apologizes for his rough treatment and has him taken to see Joe. The Doctor's initial joy is replaced with wariness when the Overseer subtly shakes his head as the Controller sweet talks the Doctor away. Once they are alone, the Controller demands to know why the production quotas aren't being met in the Overseer's area. He says that if the quotas aren't met, then the Overseer and his family will suffer for it. Once the Controller leaves, the Overseer radios the guerrilla hideout and reveals the capture of the Doctor. However, before he can say any more, he is attacked by an Ogron. The Controller treats the Doctor and Joe to a traditional 20th century banquet. Joe seems to be enjoying her time in the future, but the Doctor questions the idyllic narrative the Controller spins versus what he has seen since he arrived. The Controller tries to pawn off the factory as a rehabilitation centre for hardened criminals, but the Doctor is sceptical due to the age ranges of the people he saw in there. Joe chides the Doctor for his rudeness, saying the guerrillas would have killed him, but the Doctor questions their motives, and he also questions the Controller of the need of the Ogrons in order to keep things so peaceful. The Doctor demands to know who is really in charge of Earth, but the Controller leaves, saying that he has business to attend to. After he goes, Joe gives out to the Doctor, but he tells her that the Daleks are the ones who are in charge, and the Controller is just their puppet. As they speak, they are unaware that they are being watched by the Daleks, who say that they will run a test to see if he is actually the Doctor, as his appearance has changed since their last encounter. The Doctor and Joe then escape by incapacitating their Ogron guard, and then flee on the guard's motor trike. Unfortunately, they are caught by the faster Ogrons. Their capture is reported to Guerrilla Hideout, and against Boaz's objections, Monia says that they will go rescue them. Meanwhile, the Doctor is strapped into a machine that scans his brain and projects his previous incarnations onto a screen. Confirming that he is their sworn enemy, the Daleks prepare to exterminate him. Episode 4. The Controller intervenes, saying that the Doctor can give them information about the guerrillas. He insists upon interrogating the Doctor himself, telling the Daleks that their methods could kill him before he reveals anything. He says he will use Joe as an incentive to make the Doctor talk, and has her sent for. The Daleks inform the revived Doctor that they have mastered their own time travel technology and used it to conquer Earth at a time before he defeated them in their original invasion. They intend to use their new mastery to conquer the universe throughout all time. The Controller then takes the Doctor away to his quarters, where Joe is waiting, and he begs him to reveal what he knows about the guerrillas' plans so he can save both himself and Joe. The Doctor says that the Daleks will kill him no matter what he says, but the Controller insists that the Daleks can be reasoned with. The Doctor brands him as a traitor for his assistance towards the Daleks, but the Controller recounts his motivations for helping them. He tells them that the world descended to an all-out global war at the end of the 20th century, and over the next 100 years, 7/8 of the world population died, with the survivors being forced to live underground. The Daleks then arrived and took control, using certain humans to help control the human workforces. The Doctor says he is still a traitor, and even though he claims to have made life somewhat bearable for humanity, he would have been better suited to helping the guerrillas fight back against the Daleks. The Controller says their efforts are wasted and that the rebellion will fail. Outside, the rebels have launched an assault on the factory, and Boaz is killed by a bomb he used on a Dalek while it was about to kill a gnat. Monia urges the rest of them onto the command room as they eliminate the Orgon security troops. They successfully take control of the command center and rescue the Doctor and Joe. Monia prepares to kill the Controller, but the Doctor stops him, saying that the Daleks are their real enemy. Monia reluctantly agrees and they flee, leaving the Controller perturbed. Back at the Guerrilla Hideout, Monia and Annette are filling the Doctor and Joe in about why they went back in time in the first place. According to their surviving history books, Sir Reginald lured the delegates to the peace conference and then blew them up, accidentally killing himself as well, presumably due to a faulty timer on the bomb. Realizing that the rebellion was doomed to fail, they stole the plans for the Daleks' time machines and made their own rudimentary versions in order to go back and stop Sir Reginald before he could carry out his plan. Monia then says that they rescued the Doctor and Joe because they are enemies of the Daleks, and the Doctor would be the best person to go back in time and kill Sir Reginald. The Doctor refuses to murder someone, even if it means saving millions of lives, due to the uncertain nature of the history books. Joe finds it hard to believe that Sir Reginald would be capable of such a heinous act, and the Doctor agrees with her, saying his obstinate nature is not a malicious one. He then asks if any of the guerrillas are still back in the past, and Annette says that Shura is still unaccounted for, as they presumed him to be dead. The Doctor then asks if they brought any explosives back into the past with them, and Annette confirms that they did. The Doctor then reveals that the gorilla's actions have actually created a temporal paradox, as by going back to kill Sir Reginald, they have actually set in motion the events that created their own timeline. Back in the 20th century, Yates reports to the Brigadier that there's still no sign of the Doctor and Joe, and the Brigadier tells him to search again using whatever resources he needs. He then receives a message informing him about the imminent arrival of Sir Reginald and the delegates for the peace talks. Near the manor, the wounded Shura emerges from a nearby cluster of trees and makes his way into the cellar via the rear entrance. Once inside, he starts to prepare his bomb. In the command center, the controller is being berated by the Daleks for his failures and is threatened with extermination, but he asks for one more chance to recapture the Doctor. He is given the one last chance, and he goes to prepare an ambush at the rail bridge. The Doctor and Joe are escorted to the tunnels beneath the rail bridge by the guerrillas, but once they go down into the tunnels, they are apprehended by a squad of Ogrons and the controller. The Doctor says that he knows how to change the past, and the controller, intrigued by this, dismisses the Ogrons and hears him out. The controller then lets him go, thanking the Doctor for making the guerrillas spare his life. He then returns to the Daleks to report their capture, but he is betrayed by the interrogator, who followed him into the tunnels and witnessed him letting the Doctor and Joe go. Taking solace in the fact that he may have helped in stopping the Daleks from conquering the Earth in the first place, he resigns himself to his debt. Once he is killed, the Daleks appoint the interrogator to replace him, and then organise an assault party to go back in time to stop the Doctor. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Joe arrive back in the 20th century, and they are met by Benton and his men, who take them back to the manor just as Sir Reginald and the delegates arrive for the peace talks. The Doctor rushes inside and instructs the Brigadier to take Sir Reginald and the delegates to safety. Sir Reginald refuses to leave, but the Doctor ignores him and tells the Brigadier to use force if he has to. He then rushes down to the cellar to find Shura. Meanwhile, an assault party of Daleks and Ogrons have emerged from underneath the rail bridge and engaged the unit forces guarding it, killing several of them. Benton radios to Yates and tells him that they can't hold their ground, and the Brigadier uses this to take command, and he forces Sir Reginald and the others to leave. The Dalek forces advance on the manor, being slowed by the mortar and heavy weapons fire from the retreating unit forces. Joe rushes down to the cellar and tells the Doctor and Shura that the Daleks have reached the house, which helps the Doctor convince Shura that killing Sir Reginald won't help matters. Shura then tells him to leave, saying that he will blow up the Daleks once they enter the house. He informs him that he can't set a fuse in the bomb due to the fact that it's made of Dalekanium, a highly volatile and unstable compound that is the only thing effective against the Daleks' armour, and therefore he will have to sacrifice himself. The Doctor and Joe leave and inform the Brigadier to pull all his men back to allow the Daleks into the house. Once inside, the Daleks search for Sir Reginald so they can kill him to preserve the timeline, but Shura blows up the house. The explosion is witnessed by everyone, and Sir Reginald vows to make the peace talks a success. The Doctor and Joe share a cryptic message about seeing what will happen if he fails. End of the story. So, I think it is time to go over to the trivia spot, but before we do that, I actually read the novelization of this way back when I started my secondary level education. I actually read this on a school tour, and I had lots of people asking me what the hell I was reading. Because the book is actually called Day of the Ogrons, or Day of the Ogrons.
So actually, a lot of people first discovered this story through the book. And when it eventually came to be released on VHS and stuff, there was thoughts. And I'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah. So, how about we go back to the start?
Yeah, we'll start from the top. So, the air date for Day of the Daleks was the 1st of January to the 22nd of January 1972. The writer...
Sorry to cut across. Would that effectively make this the very first New Year's special?
Because it's the start of a new season. No, because it wasn't a special. It was just the start of the new season.
Yeah, but no, like the season 12, so Jodie's second season, technically that started on New Year's Day as well as a sort of a season start / special.
No, yeah, but this wasn't a thing back then, so...
Yeah,
no.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. The writer for this story wasn't Terry Nation. So, Terry was unable to write the script. He was really busy working on the ITV series The Persuaders. So instead, the writer for the story is a man named Lewis Marks. This is the second of 4 stories written by Lewis. We previously saw his work in Planet of the Giants, which you and I were discussing offline a second ago.
Yeah.
We'll see his work again in Planet of Evil and The Mask of Mandragora. So an interesting collection there with some
Very
of my
interesting.
favourites.
Mm-hmm.
The director of this story is Paul Bernard. This is the first of 3 stories directed by Paul. We'll see his work again in The Time Monster and Frontier in Space. Paul passed away back in 1997. The working title for the story were a number of them. The Ghost Hunters was like the original one. Then there was
Mm-hmm.
Years of Doom, The Time Warriors, which clearly got repurposed later, The Day of the Daleks, and Ghosts. The reason why only one of those mentions the word Daleks is because when Louis Marks submitted his original story, it didn't mention the Daleks at all. But Barry wanted to bring the Daleks back. Originally, there was talk of that Barry would actually write the story himself. But obviously, they knew Terry wasn't going to be available, and Terry gave his blessing or whatever. Originally, it was maybe going to be Barry himself who was going to write it with his writing partner that we discussed last time, under the name of Guy Leopold. But that would have been later on at the back of the season, and Barry really wanted to start the season sort of with a bang. So they decided to bring it up, and it was Terrence Dix who suggested that the story that was submitted by Lewis would be a good one to add the Daleks into. So the story was pretty much the same, and Terrence was like, well, we'll just have the controller not be the ultimate bad guy. He's a puppet of the Daleks. It's fairly easy to insert them in, and it wouldn't take too much work. Now, I mentioned that one of the working titles is The Day of the Daleks. So the on-screen title of this is Day of the Daleks, with only one "the" in the middle. The original VHS and the Laserdisc called it The Day of the Daleks, with 2 "thes." I think this is the problem that a lot of fans have with a lot of, and I even did it a second ago, we're so used to the word "the" appearing in Doctor Who titles. For example, Lewis's previous story is Planet of Giants, not what I have always called it, which is
Planet of the Giants.
Planet of the Giants. There is no "the." So this even carries over into like the published media.
And it's really annoying when you're doing like a quiz and like you're kind of going, no, I know the fucking story. It's the 3-parter that was actually a 4-parter that was edited down. I know it is Planet of the... Oh, it's Planet of Giants, right? Gotcha.
Yeah. So Day of the Daleks marks the return of the Daleks after about 5 years. And this is also their first appearance on TV in colour. We'd obviously seen them in colour in the non-canonical Doctor Who movies that you and I previously reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and check out the sabbaticals. Go back and check out the ramblings on those. I was stealing mission logs. And their thing isn't even sabbatical, it's supplemental. Whatever.
Yeah.
Go back and watch the... Fuck it, we'll cut this entire section. Fuck it.
To be fair, we were on a sabbatical when those were released.
We were. Fuck it, I'll leave it in. Go back and listen to the ramblings where we talk about those two things. Now, both John and Katie describe this story as kind of the low point of their Doctor Who experience. One of the main complaints was just how unbelievable the Dalek attack on the house was. With John estimating that there was 2 Daleks, there was 3. They could not have launched a fearsome final battle. Also, we considered the Ogrons had to kind of keep pace with the Daleks. And like, I watched the making of for this story. I watched it on the DVD last night, and clearly everyone knew that it wasn't best done. Like, you look at some of the Ogrons, and some of them are really into it, and some of them are just looking around going, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Like, it's... I have thoughts about it for my overall, but compared to some of the other like action sequences we've seen with Daleks en masse, this is one of the poorer ones.
And the thing is, most people had first discovered this story like post-transmission pre-VHS through the book, which was written by Terrence, I believe, which described the final battle in a final battle sort of way. And so when 2 Entertain, the company that does the DVDs, they were concerned that what they paid for didn't really match up with what fans expected from having read the book. So they actually did a couple of reshots, kind of bits for the DVD release. And they also redubbed the Daleks with Nicholas Briggs, who has done most of the Dalek voices in New Who. He's one of the producers over at Big Finish. Very, very involved in Doctor Who these days.
Yeah.
The original Dalek voice actors, who are Oliver Gilbert and Peter Messalina, obviously it's been 5 years since the Daleks were on screen. They'd never done a Dalek voice before. And I think there's some of the Dalek voices that are still them on the DVD because they sound very...
Unsure of themselves.
Yeah, they're very wrong. The guys did not find the portrayal well, and they were not used after this. After this, they went back to using Michael Wisher, and, that was it from then on.
I watched this, I think, before the 2011 DVD release. So, like, I didn't see any of those like reshot sequences. Like, I saw them like when I scanned through a different copy, but yeah, in terms of like the comments about to entertain and expectations versus reality, I do have thoughts on that as well from my remembrance of the book.
Yeah, like the book really bigged this up in a big way, and if you were comparing them, and it'll be interesting to see if this plays in at all into your overall score. If you experience the book first, is this a letdown as a story in comparison? So maybe the effects are a letdown because budget or whatever, but I'm curious to see in your overall if it's a letdown as a story in comparison.
And especially seeing as how, because remember Colony in Space, I had read that before I saw it. And I think I said that I thought the television version worked better than the book. So we'll see now if it's the same here.
Yeah. So the mind analysis machine is an interesting thing. That we'll see kind of iterations of it almost later on. But this is the first time we see an image of Patrick Troughton since his departure. We also see an image of William Hartnell, but his image was last seen in Power of the Daleks when Patrick is looking in the mirror to see what he's regenerated into or whatever. Episode 4 was originally meant to include a conversation or a confrontation between the Doctor and the Daleks, where they kind of explain, in Evil of the Daleks, there was this whole thing about introducing the human factor, and the Daleks were like super weird at the end of it. They weren't like vicious monsters or whatever. So there was meant to be a part in episode 4 where the Daleks in episode 4 explained how all the ones with the human factor had been killed off, and how they got basically from Evil of the Daleks to here.
Yeah, because like,
what the hell happened there?
Because I was watching at one point kind of going, so you're not going to examine the the fallout of what appears to be your own shoddy handiwork. You assumed that they were gone for good.
Yeah, so that was meant to be covered, but it was edited out because the episode was running long. And again, I'm curious, like you've read the book, and you might not have read it in a while. I'm curious if that's in the book.
From my memory, I haven't read that book in a very long time because I believe I gave you that book.
I will check the book.
Yeah, I believe it is sitting in one of your bookshelves.
Is it?
Yep.
I literally just redid my Target books yesterday.
No, these the cover for this one and the Colony in Space, they're not the classic white Target novelization books. They're black cover books.
Oh, maybe I put them somewhere else. I will check. Irrelevant. Moving on. In the original script, the Ogrons were never named, and they weren't really described very well either. They were just monster. Like, there was a monster, and that's what they were. It was actually Barry Letts who came up with the idea of Ogron, because he kind of mentioned that they looked a bit like ogres. And they went, oh, ogre, Ogron. There we go. This is the first story we see where the Doctor interacts with another version of themselves.
I have like a weird Mandela effect about this story because I was convinced that the story comes full circle and Joe and the Doctor return.
It does in the book. Because it did in the original script.
Yeah, I was like,
and then they cut it out.
I was like, I had this weird mind because like I remember like they go back and they see their previous selves, and the previous selves are the ones that disappear, and they then walk into the lab.
Yeah, no, in the book, I think that was left in, and in the original script, there was meant to be that whole thing coming full circle, but it was kind of decided. I think it was Paul Bernard kind of went, but we've done this already. Do you know, like, we don't need to do the scene again from the other side. It's fucking not needed. Joe's reference to September the 13th in episode 2, that was a bit of an in joke. That was the day they started filming on location. So that's the date they picked. This is the first Dalek story since the Daleks to not feature a change in the main cast. Either addition or subtraction.
Yeah, because I suppose at the end of the Mythmakers, Katarina would have been considered to have been a main cast member.
Yep.
Despite your thoughts on the. Yeah, she would have been considered. Yeah, because I was going to think DMP. No. But justice for Brett. Well, clearly now the break has gotten justice for Brett here.
Yes, he has. Go, Alistair.
Yeah.
One thing you may have noticed as well is apparently in the novelization, the gold Dalek is replaced by a black Dalek.
Mm.
Though there is still a gold Dalek, but he's just a black Dalek superior.
Yeah.
What did you think of the motorized tricycle?
Okay, that is a very confusing scene because are they meant to portray like the Ogrons as being really fast, or is the bike just actually really shit?
The bike is really shit. The bike is really shit. So that was John's idea. So and people know this about John Pertwee. John Pertwee loved anything with a motor on it. He loved cars. He loved planes. He loved speedboats. He loved hovercraft, like the hovercraft from the 70s. And so he had seen this motorized tricycle, which is that's all I'm going to call it. I'm not going to call it like a 3-wheeler motorbike because that's not what it is. It is essentially a motorized tricycle.
Mm. And
he thought it'd be great to include it. And they liked indulging his little whims like that because it kind of played into who his doctor was and stuff. So they put it in. Now, John described it as one of the most dangerous stunts that he insisted on doing. I think that may have been a bit of a sarcastic statement because, according to Barry Letts, the thing went about 3 miles an hour, and the Ogrons could have caught up to it by walking.
Like, I think it was probably like at some points it did look like it was about to topple over.
Oh, it was, and Katie Manning kind of said that like only the fact that like John rode motorcycles and Katie was used to being a passenger, that they knew how to correctly move their bodies on a vehicle like that to not topple. But it was moving about 3 miles an hour.
I can empathize because like I was kicked off a quad bike. I was on a school tour and we were being shown how to ride quad bikes, and I was kicked off it because I accidentally pulled a wheelie by revving too much.
Yeah. So the thing is that like it only goes by 3 miles an hour. Like Barry Letts was basically saying that like it was a bad idea to include it, but you know John liked it, so fuck it. But it meant the Ogrons had to deliberately run slowly. Like bear in mind, like Google Maps puts average walking speed at a 20-minute mile.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing went roughly 3 miles an hour, which is, if you divide it down, a 20-minute walk. This thing went walking speed.
Yeah.
And those poor fuckers had to pretend to be running after it. And oh no, I didn't catch it. Last thing, and I don't know a lot about this, and Paddy, maybe you do, because you're a bit of a history buff compared to me. Lewis Marks was heavily influenced apparently by the 6 Days War between Egypt and Israel. I don't know a whole lot about that.
I don't know a huge part about it either because like it's one area that I work for an Israeli company, so and they do have observances and they mention stuff about this, and I'm like, I feel like I should know more about this. But there's actually one historical thing in here that I think is like quite possibly the most British thing the show has done so far.
Oh yeah, what's that?
It's when he calls the controller a traitor, and then he calls him a quisling.
What the hell is that?
A quisling is a term from World War II. Basically, in Norway, I think he was the head of like the fascist party in Norway, helped the Nazis take over, and his name was Vidkun Quisling, and he was the head of the puppet government spearheaded by the Nazis. So his name, because he had helped the Nazis take over his own country, his name became synonymous with like treachery. So like you'd see like in a lot of old World War II movies, whenever someone's accused of being like a Nazi sympathizer or a Nazi spy, they're called quisling. Now, it apparently it's kind of synonymous, with the word treachery even now. But I'm like, the guy said that 7/8 of the world's population were eliminated in this big war, and we know that the history books are very few and far between. Like, I don't know, that would be like me calling someone from America a langer. They just have no concept of what the word means. So it's
Yeah.
like, how dare you? Should I be insulted by this?
It also seems like a weird word for the doctor to use.
Yeah,
Like, you'd get maybe Joe using it.
yeah, but no. But
Yeah.
again, it's like it really kind of it really does date the show. It's like it is very British in its thing.
Yeah, I literally had in my notes, what the hell is that? And I was planning on asking you.
Yeah.
So, on to our cast. So, as Sir Reginald Styles, we've Wilfred Carter. This is his only Doctor Who appearance. His non-Who credits include Softly Softly, Z-Cars, Emergency Ward 10, and No Hiding Place. Wilfred passed away in 1998. As Boaz, we have Scott Fredericks. This is the first of 2 appearances for Scott. We'll see him again in the Image of the Image of the Fendal. His non-Who credits include Rock Rivals, The White Rabbit, Crossroads, Dixon of Dock Green, Blake 7, and again, Z-Cars. Scott passed away in 2017.
He was also in the Dad's Army movie, the original one.
Oh.
He plays a Nazi pilot that attempts to take over Wilmington on Sea.
Do you remember a couple of weeks ago my mum contributed to our podcast through her random comments?
Yes.
She had bet. I was saying that we kind of joked that we'd one day do a MASH podcast. And mom was like, "Oh, like Paddy is like would totally be like the type of person who like be into Dad's Army and stuff." I'm like, yes, yes, he is. And you have just proved my mother right.
Yep.
Shura is played by Jimmy Winston. This is Jimmy's, again, only Doctor Who credit. His non-Who credits include Doctor in the House, UFO, Justice, and The Sweeney. Jimmy passed away just in September of last year. Anat is played by Anna Barry. This is her only on-screen appearance, though she has done a couple of audio stories as well. Her non-Who credits include The Further Adventure of the Musketeers, General Hospital, Your Highness, Doctors, and she was apparently in Deathly Hallows Part 1. She was a muggle.
Oh.
Lastly, as the controller, we have Aubrey Woods. This is Aubrey's only Doctor Who appearance. His non-Who credits include Bleak House, Wuthering Heights, Up Pompeii, Blake 7, and the one that I think most people would recognize him from, maybe just most people like us, is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The good one, not Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the shit one.
Who works for the Daleks? Takes away your rights. Forces all humanity to put up a fight. The Controller Man. The Controller Man. I just made that up on the spot.
Very good. Very good, bravo.
Thank you. Yes, that's right. He is the Candyman from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So, possibly making him even creepier.
Yeah, a little bit. We'll get to him later.
Yeah.
But yeah, and thus endeth our cast, and thus endeth our trivia.
So, once again, thank you for the trivia spot.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to go over to the character discussion component of this podcast. So, as always, we have the Doctor, we have the companions, we have prominent characters, and we also have the villains of the piece. Now, even though this thing is stacked with characters, we only have the Doctor, Joe and the Brig for the companions, the Guerrilla faction and the Controller for the prominent characters, and the Ogrons and the Daleks for the villains. We don't really have anything from our man Benton and his gal Yates, or his gal Friday Yates, or Sir Reginald.
Yeah, I thought Sir Reginald would have more to do, but he
so did I, and like, see, again, bringing from my memory of the book, I felt like there was a lot of stuff here that was like through the like we've talked before about, like, stuff that's expanded upon through the medium of novelization. And I think, having read the book first, there was some stuff that I was kind of missing in terms of like character moments and things like that. So like that's why Sir Reginald and Benton and Yates aren't as prominent as they would have been in the novel, and why the gorillas have all been kind of lumped together.
Yeah.
So we start off with the Doctor.
Yeah, clearly this doctor has moved on from asking for a glass of milk at the OK Corral.
Yeah.
That's something that actually is explored a bit on the DVD. Some people consider it a bit controversial that the doctor was drinking wine. Terrence Dicks didn't really care. As far as Terrence was concerned, each doctor was different. When you regenerate, your preferences change. But apparently Barry didn't like it too much to see the doctor drinking or associating the doctor with alcohol, just because it was targeted at a young audience. But Terrence is kind of like, he drinks now.
Yeah, because like if you
Okay.
remember, like the first Doctor smoked a pipe, and then that was
Yeah.
phased out. And then, like from what we saw, the second Doctor had no voices bar maybe playing the recorder at inappropriate times.
I'm being a sexist prick half the time.
Yeah, but it's funny to think like that the third Doctor, like he's so very famous for like his velvet smoking jackets. Never see him with a cigarette, a cigar.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's one of the reasons why Barry didn't really care about the drinking too much. So it kind of played in with the whole dandy
the
character
debonair,
that John was creating. But in terms of the Doctor himself, right, that was just an observation that I saw, particularly because the other day was the anniversary of that historical event, the OK Corral.
Oh, right.
Last week, apparently, was the anniversary of that, or earlier this week. Anyway, the thing I like about the Doctor in this story is I love how he doesn't jump to any conclusions about the human characters. Even the controller, to a certain extent, he doesn't. He challenges him, but he doesn't condemn him. So he challenges the controller's beliefs that there's nothing better that he could do. He challenges the controller's beliefs that like the Daleks can't be defeated, and he questions what the controller has benefited from over the years at the detriment of the rest of humanity. But he doesn't condemn the man either. Do you know? He won't let the gorillas kill him. And similarly with the gorillas, Joe is very quick, and understandably so, to assume that the gorillas are nothing but terrorists. Do you know? Based off of her experience. They attempted to kill Sir Reginald. They attacked the house. They took them hostage. They tied them up. They kept going on about how they wanted to kill Sir Reginald. But I like how the Doctor is like, there has to be more to it. There has to be more to it, because it sort of gives that sympathetic side of him that we saw, and it kind of reminded me of Enemy of the World.
Yeah.
And how the second Doctor wouldn't just go along with who we would consider to be the good guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, even though like Astrid or whatever he got on quite well with, he still wouldn't do what they asked of him without knowing more. I think that really carries through here.
I think it's like when you're told like there's an absolutism that someone has to die for the benefit of something or other. It's not that someone must be defeated or someone must be removed from power or whatever, but it's when someone must be killed.
Yeah.
There's an absolutism there that he knows when something's an absolute, as we talked about, way back when we discussed the Aztecs, versus something that's potentially in flux, such as the Dalek invasion of Earth.
The trike, though, like, I mean, it would have been faster if you guys had just run or walked briskly. Like, I mean,
it reminds me of The Simpsons when Sideshow Bob uses the Wright brothers plane to escape, and it's just like the pilots are there walking slowly behind it.
Yeah. No, I like the Doctor in this one. Like, I'm trying to think if there's anything negative.
There is one negative. I agree with a lot of what you're saying there, because I have it there. Like, and I like as well like how his act of kindness, comes good in the sense of the controller's like, you spared me, and like I'll talk about the controller when it gets to it, but he's like, just like, fuck it, prove me right. But I get that he was possibly trying to keep Joe calm, but he doesn't need to fucking mock her intelligence in order to do that. So, when like they're tied up and he's like, oh, like you probably just like, I'll ask a lot of fool questions. And just like, come on. Like, I just like, I thought we were kind of fucking past the point where like you have to that that she's intelligent, and like okay, if you want to like start kind of poking fun at her for the whole there's ghosts in the house thing, absolutely fine. But
Why
when
is that fine?
I think based on the end of the demons or whatever,
Mm.
there is a thing where it's like, okay, because he said, oh, maybe there is some magic in the world after all.
Mm.
So like he can still kind of claim the like superior fucking like high ground for that, but she can also kind of point out, can your science explain like this spooky shit? I'm
Yeah,
looking
but
for
why?
that.
You said it would be okay if he was just making fun of her over the ghost thing. Why would that be okay?
Because in my head it's a bit between them, the same way that you and I have.
Was the way I saw it was that her questioning him was a bit between them, because later on when she does get the mouth through, I was like, cool, now it's time for my questions. I saw that bit as a bit, whereas I think my one slight negative was like he was a little bit. I don't think it was intentional at all. But he's a little bit oblivious to just how freaked out she is at the
Yeah,
notion that the house is haunted.
yeah,
Which I didn't particularly like. But then again, it was completely unintentional, so I didn't mind. And then when we got to that point, he was like, okay, come on, use your escapology. Come on. Like, let's,
yeah.
But I saw that as being the bit, and the other part as being oblivious, as opposed to the other part being the bit and this being mean.
I don't know what it was. It was just like I was just like, it's not like we're going to discuss the arc in space. Where like that's like motivation to do better. No, it's a bit of a fucking prickish motivation to do better. Whereas here it's just like it kind of comes out of nowhere for me anyway.
Okay.
But no, again, like the other thing is, as well, as I said, like we talked about the absolutism, like and he refuses to do it. It's like he even says it's like with your means, I know with your ends, yes, I agree. With your means, no, I don't. And that's what he says to the rebels, like like I'll help you, but like I'm not going to kill someone. Like there has to be another way to change the outcome.
And this is an interesting thing when you consider it in the context of the times.
Yeah.
This came out in 1972.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the British mindset at the time, this is the height of the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of a rebel faction performing what to many are considered terrorist actions.
Yeah.
I think having the Doctor come down on the side of, I agree with what you want, but I don't agree with how you're doing it, I think is a very interesting way of portraying that, because it could have been very easy to make the gorillas purely evil. I think the gorillas in this sort of remind me of like Kira Nerys from Deep Space Nine. Kira Nerys was a terrorist.
Yep.
That is fact. However, we sympathize with Kira because the Cardassians were assholes.
Yeah.
And so we understand why she was doing what she was doing. I think the gorillas kind of come across the same.
But it's like the same with a lot of like, people always say about, if you want to put Moses into a historical context, yeah, he's the liberator of his people. But for like the Egyptians, he was a terrorist.
Yeah. So I like the way the Doctor sort of doesn't give in to the violent nature of it, but still sort of says like there are times when you have people doing violent things for understandable reasons.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting way for him to address it.
It was. Yeah. I agree. Shall we move over to Jo?
Yes. I feel for Jo here. Jo is an incredibly trusting person. She also takes a lot of things at face value. Yeah. So the gorillas, let's face it, the gorillas had no issue with tying her up. They had no issue with threatening the Doctor. They had no issue with waiting to kill Styles or whatever. It is completely understandable that from her point of view, they are evil thugs. And then she meets the controller, who A, agrees with her on that, so thereby reinforcing her belief, is kind to her, feeds her, chats away with her, seems to have a very congenial way about him when talking to her. I think I feel for her because she got duped and used.
Yeah.
And even when the doctor is calling the controller out on his behavior, Joe after is like, "Why were you like that to him? Like
Yeah.
he's been nothing but kind to me and whatever." And like I've been in that situation myself. I think that's probably why I feel for her. Where I've known people who I never had any issues with them. They were lovely to me,
Hmm.
only for me to find out later that they were horrible people to others.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay then. So I kind of feel for Joe in this one. I do like though how her escapology does come up. I noticed that she didn't get the doctor and herself out of it, but when she was just tied up by herself while the doctor was on the phone, she did manage to get out of it.
Hmm.
Which was great, and I like that we see her screaming being used as a distraction on purpose.
Yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that. That
I
was a good
always
one.
love when we have, because I think that's happened once or twice before. But I do always love when we have a stereotypical screamy character
Hmm.
whose stereotypical scream is used deliberately
Yeah, I think
as a
like
distraction. Did
the best
Victoria
example.
do it?
No, I think the best example of it is Susan. I can't remember what story it was in, but she's screaming and then she just gives a subtle wink at the camera. Like, is it the Daleks? It might be the Daleks. I can't remember
Maybe.
what story it is.
I don't know, but I love when that
Mm.
happens because unfortunately a lot of the classic characters are just seen as being the screamer. But I love the idea that in universe they know they scream a lot.
I think that comes from like I would say about maybe roughly 3/4 of the time, whenever you see a picture of Victoria,
Mm,
it's the still image from the Ice Warriors where she's got the hands cupping her face and she's screaming.
mm,
So like that's your impression of Victoria.
yeah.
And like it's kind of like the same. It is like a thing of where it's like in order to get it's used to when they talk about like the whole hiding behind the sofa aspect.
Mm,
That's the go-to. It's the female characters' reactions to the fucking spooky.
mm,
Um, what you said about the doctor, his stance on like the methods and the goals of the terrorists or
mm,
the guerrillas. I think like Joe is like a really. This is a great example of like the character bringing you through, like you being the gateway for you into this world. As like if you think about it, right, Joe is. You can kind of say that she's in a sort of a maybe gilded cage / ivory tower. Like even say take her from her own time,
mm,
where she's working for the UN. You know, we don't really see a whole lot of the real world going on. Like this is actually, I think this is a nice character from Mind of Evil, where there is the peace talks and
yeah.
you've got the Chinese delegation. So like, but the whole concept of what's happening in the real world doesn't really come up on a day-to-day basis in each story of Doctor Who.
Mm,
So you've got Joe's life there as a unit agent, working alongside the Doctor, and then you see the terrorist faction or whatever. But when she arrives in the time zone that the terrorists are from, she's immediately in an ivory tower. Like
yeah.
all she's seeing is the people being nice to her and all that kind of stuff. So obviously, yeah, that's her distorted worldview. But when she goes into the flip side, it's nice. And now I'd say the Doctor helps with this reversal of the mindset. But you can see then where it's like she does go with the flow a lot. Like, and she's like talking about, like, but I can't imagine like that someone like Sir Reginald would do such a thing.
Mm,
And like she gets to see a huge, like she gets a great education in this story, I think, in terms of like judging stuff based on the worldview or judging books by cover. Also how coincidence can have like a huge ripple effect, or actions based on a coincidence can have a huge ripple effect throughout time.
yeah, I think with Joe, like you commented there, I think even we see it even in the stories that she's in her
Mm.
day to day life, and we've commented on how it's not a good thing, do you know? But even the Brig, Yates, the Doctor, Benton less so, only at the orders of the others, they try to protect her from everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's always left behind. They try to keep her away from the dangerous things as much as possible. So I think you're right. I think this is a big eye opening moment for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Doctor is very patient with her in trying to guide her through it. He doesn't call her an idiot or anything like that. He's very patient in guiding her through it and helping her to see things from the other point of view.
And it was great to see him being so Joe focused on, like his priorities in this story were find Joe and then deal with the Daleks, not deal with the Daleks and then find Joe.
Yeah.
So
again, improvement over ambassadors.
Yeah. And again, as well, I like seeing the true character line of even though she's had her experiences with the demons and she knows that certain aspects of the supernatural can be explained away by science, there's still the aspect of it that always remains there.
I think it's she asks him, "Do are ghosts real?" And he's like, "Well, there are different types of ghosts," and that doesn't help at all.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Look, we all
know he didn't say no.
Yeah, we all know Casper. Okay, that's one type. That's the friendly ghost. But what about? And then I suppose the brig.
Poor Alistair. He has to put up with so much shit.
I don't know how your thoughts on this, right? But there's a scene where it's he's clearly pulled an all-nighter because he opens the door and he comes into the I suppose what is it, the war room or whatever it is, and he's still in his uniform. He's tie undone, fucking blouse open, top shirt button undone. There's just something about that just adds to his character.
Do you know what it reminds? Because then he asks for the coffee and he's told the canteen is closed. Of course, again, it really goes back to Mind of Evil again. Because one of my favorite bits of him in Mind of Evil was him asleep at his desk.
Yeah.
And the fact that clearly Corporal Bell, or whatever her name is, had come in, had pulled the curtains, and just left him to sleep. But I think that's what we see here as well. He's under a lot of pressure. And I know we're not going to be talking about
the boys.
Styles on his own, but Styles treats him kind of like shit in this, and clearly the brig is very well, you sense that his dedication to the peace talks, to the conference, whatever, it's not just a job. He cares because he's human, and the possible negative effects of these talks falling through, you're not just getting the military reaction from him. Joe, you're also getting the personal reaction from him. That was my read of it. Do you know? Alistair cares, not just the Brigadier.
Yeah. And there's one other thing that no, this could be me reading way too much into things. But for me, I think the concept of a world war stresses him out more than the concept of an interplanetary war.
Yeah.
Because it goes against, I suppose, the ideals of the United Nations.
I think it goes against the ideals of the United Nations. And I think part of it as well is if another world war was to break out. We see it in the story that leaves Earth open. If he has to try and be a soldier for the UN on a planetary war side of things, who protects the Earth from the interplanetary stuff?
Yeah.
And as well, when he describes, a third world war, you can tell how defeated he sounds at even the notion of it. We've said before that, while we didn't know it at the time, you and I have always felt that, the Brigadier he came from a military family. He's military all the way down. And this gets confirmed later on, but that's beside the point. Clearly his dad or whatever would have served in World War II. His granddad would have served in World War One. He knows the history. And I think he sees it as his job to do everything he can to stop it from happening again. And having to deal with people like Styles who don't listen to him. Styles says at one point, "You're in charge of security," but then doesn't listen to him on a security matter. You poor bastard. One thing I did love though, because we always talk about the Brigadier leading from the front, and we did have a moment of that again this time around. As soon as he hears the Doctor being say to the Marines, he's like, "Get me a jeep.
Mm.
I'm going," and he rocks up, holding that like mounted machine gun or whatever. I'm like, "Go on, Alistair, you beast."
No, no. I think as limited as his showing was,
Mm.
it's just typical of what we've come to see from the Brig.
Yeah, and I think you're right though. I think it humanized him a lot.
Yeah.
Which I'm really enjoying seeing. Like, I've always liked the Brigadier as a character, but like I'd never seen The Mind of Evil before we watched it for this. I've never seen this story before we watched it for this, and so I like the fact that through these earlier stories of him, we're getting to see more of him as a person.
And like you're also like because we started off as well at the Web of Fear, you're getting to see him throughout his entirety of the show.
Yeah.
So like you're not just getting like Tom's golden era with
Yeah.
like the last
Or
vestiges of
just
the
him
Brig.
with Liz, which I still love and will love forever.
Yeah,
But you kind of understand how he got to be that way with
yeah,
Liz. And I'm still wondering, you know, has anyone found the story that describes what happened to Jimmy? Because
yeah,
clearly that traumatized that man forever.
yeah. Sure. Cool. So now we have the prominent characters.
Yeah, so you've got the gorillas and the controller.
Yeah.
So do you want to do the gorillas first?
Yeah.
Every time I hear the
Gorillas.
word gorillas, I just think of Tarzan.
Yeah. Gorillas. So this is where I think my first recollection of a huge difference between portrayal in the book comes into effect, right? Because via the televised story, there's nothing really development wise from any of them. Like they all fit into like the typical tropish characters of dashing leader, feisty female second in command, the antagonistic muscle of the group, and then there's just the other guy who happens to be Shura in this. So whereas in the book, Shura is like he's delirious because of his injuries. Like the Ogron really fucked him up. Like I think he gets a concussion, he gets like a broken collarbone, but he goes into the rail tunnel and he falls asleep, and then he wakes up and his whole thing is like he's got to got to do the mission, and he's in a sort of like a fugue state of like or a fever state, and you have a lot of his internal monologue that he has to complete the mission, he has to do the thing, and like you're kind of like, Jesus Christ, will someone please find him in the cellar and stop him from blowing up the thing. And unfortunately, that is like one of those aspects of where it's like, yeah, I can imagine To Entertain can be like upset with that aspect of it. So yeah, there's just no real development for any of them here, and it's like we don't get any real scope as to how desperate things are for the guerrilla faction. Like
the closest we see is the fact that the doctors describe it, there's women and children in the factories, and
yeah,
that's it.
And like when Boaz dies trying to save Anat, like we don't see any follow up to the impact of his death. Like we don't have Anat, like fucking kind of going, no, shoot him, or they killed whoever. Like it's. Do you remember when we went to see Rogue One, and we watched it and we were like, and at the end we said that really helps build the stakes for A New Hope. Now we know just how desperate things are. So here with this story, it's like I think that this is a story that maybe should have been a 6-parter. There should have been something more to kind of get the stakes up,
There is an interesting thing about this, and I wanted to wait and see what you thought about our guest characters before I brought this up, is why I didn't mention it in trivia.
Yeah.
Paul Bernard isn't an actor's director. And apparently he didn't really give a shit how they said their lines, so long as they said them. And apparently there was a couple of times where there was one particularly, the guy who played Shura, when he was taking out the bomb and getting it ready, and he had in his head how this was going to be, and he'd kind of come from a lot of BBC actors come from the stage originally, right? So he had his head. He got into the character and he was doing the whole thing. And Paul was like, "What the fuck are you doing? Just do what's in the script." Do you know? And Terrence Dicks had said the line that Shura says at the end, which is, not this time or whatever. Terrence had kind of imagined that in some ways a bit like Picard in First Contact. This far, no further. That's sort of,
Yeah.
not this time. This sort of impassioned speech. And instead it's like, not this time. It's like mumbled almost.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently that was just the director was like, cool, cut, move on to the next thing. He was a director who was very focused on style. He was very focused on cinematography and that type of thing. He wasn't really focused on the character. So I wonder if you'd had a more character focused director, maybe someone like Barry, who, gets the character side of things, or some of the other directors we've had in the past. I wonder if, even if they didn't do all the things in the book, even if they didn't describe people in the same way that they were in the book, I wonder if it wouldn't have felt as jarring for you if there had been more time and focus put into the performances.
Probably. And you said there about, like, his whole thing was maybe like style. Sorry, man, you even failed at that, because, like, if you were hoping for spectacle with this story, there's no spectacle.
Well, I mean, style is in style is technical is the word I was looking for.
Okay, yeah.
So how to get everyone in frame and do the stuff that you need to do.
Okay, yeah, I get you now. Yeah, no, it's just like we've seen, like, even if you want to go to the Space Museum, like, granted, we had our differences of opinion on that story, but due to the caliber of the actors, like, I mean, like Jeremy Bulloch and the other guys that were, what was it? Even like the guy that played Ben, I cannot remember his name for the life of me now. I feel really, really bad. But his brother, do you remember? Played one. Yeah, like, they really got across the point, just like, how bad it is for their species, you know. So I just, like, I just missed it here. I just wanted a small bit more.
Yeah, I think for me the performances were, first, the one who plays Anat, Anna, she was very good. Generally speaking, I think it would be nice if she'd been given more to do and given more chance to react. But apparently, and again, this is according to Barry Letts, she kind of was able to kind of just do her own thing, and it still came out quite well. Whereas the others, being left to their own devices, maybe didn't. But she had done more TV, whereas the others hadn't. The others had done a lot more stage, and they hadn't done TV as much. And without the proper direction from Paul, it just sort of floundered a bit, I suppose. But I think what was interesting to me about the guerrillas is that I did equate them in many ways to the Bajoran militia, or more accurately to the Bajoran insurgents from Deep Space Nine, and Kira in particular in that, because they're very much going for a needs of the many type thing. And it's interesting to think that without knowing 100% what happened, without knowing what the ramifications would be, that they would commit to killing this person outright.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to have put a whole lot of thought into it. It's just go there and kill him. Bearing in mind that all they have to go on is that he arranged the talks in his house, and then the house blew up.
Yeah.
And they took those 3 pieces of information and created this narrative that he tricked everyone to his house and blew it up, killing himself. I think that's a bit of a leap.
But what's very interesting, right? And I think it's more so to do with the age we're living in now, where, depending on where you get your source of information from, the facts are highly distorted. So, like, obviously, the big thing here was that the Chinese delegation were the ones that were having the most issues with stuff.
Yeah.
And we're in a time, like, where when the show is being made, you have the the dual threat, I suppose, of China and Russia, and we're in the Cold War era. So, I love it as well. Like they talk about like how in South America, like these other little these nations are like waging war against their rivals.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, the book said that Styles was the one that started this, but where did that book come from? Like
Yeah.
where did you get that?
Yeah, if
Because
you're going to mess with history.
yeah, because I can't really imagine, like, because it's still like where the location of the 22nd century is still in England,
Mm.
so I can't really imagine like a British history textbook painting themselves as the instigator of a fucking global war.
No, but what I could actually, do you know what I actually maybe could. If you imagine you have people who were against the talks,
Hmm.
or you have people who, you know, were direct, the opposition party, as it were,
So
saying it's his fault.
right, and like yeah, so I suppose even in like again, that actually goes to my point of the whole. It depends what paper you're reading,
Yeah.
because you've got people that read the Daily Mail, then you've got people that read the Guardian, and people that read the Telegraph, and it's like
Yeah.
same story, but disparate views on who's at fault here.
Yeah.
Yeah, time travel stories are like this are they're really cool. I like them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Then we have the controller, who, okay, Paddy, you know this about me.
mm-hmm.
Name a character from a well-loved childhood musical that I am terrified of.
Bert the Lamplighter from Mary Poppins.
He comes in second.
Yes, it is the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
It is. I will tell you something. The Candyman from Willy Wonka actually does come in very close second. And there's a reason why, right? He has maybe 3 scenes in the entire thing. 2 scenes in the entire film. But in the first one, he's fucking creepy. Because they do the whole song, and then all the children disappear into, like, they disappear into his house.
Never to be seen again.
It's fucking creepy, right? And this is the same man, and it's also creepy. Because in this story, we have him being kind of what we're used to seeing from any characters that interact with the Daleks, very stiff, very regimented. And even like the women that were in that base, holy shit, their directing was shocking.
They're very robotic.
Very robotic. They were almost talking like the Daleks, which is really weird. But he's not as extreme as them, but he's still in that very robotic nature. When the minute Joe turns up and he just turns on the charm, oh no, it's fine, sit in my chair, or whatever. And he's laughing with her later on, and I'm like, it just comes across as so fucking creepy. And it probably doesn't help that, and this could just be the studio lighting, it looks like he's constantly sweating.
See, I raised this point there, like just when we were off air, like all the humans that work for the Daleks look like they have an iron deficiency because they're very, very pale.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed the pale thing, or the blue nail thing was the other thing you mentioned.
Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that. I noticed that it looks like he's constantly sweating.
I think that's the thing though, like with studio lighting, because I think a lot of shots in this particular area, when they're in the studio, they do look like they are sweating.
Yeah, but it just adds to it because he's being that sort of like man in a van offering you sweets. He's being child catchery or like Candyman shop man-y, and
it's the fact that he's so dressed all in black as well doesn't really help matters.
But like as a person, like he is someone who clearly, from what we see anyway, his family has been controllers for generations.
Yeah,
he is king of the ants, and he loves being king of the ants. What I was waiting for at the end was his sort of General Hux reveal. Because at one point, the leader of the gorillas, I've forgotten his name, Mania, he said that they had a contact inside Control.
Yeah.
And I thought they were going to reveal that the contact inside Control was actually the controller.
Yeah.
And that's why he went and spoke to your man about production numbers being low
Hmm.
as a sort of, hey, if you don't cop on, I will have no. The Daleks will
Yeah.
make me. I know it's you. They don't know it's you yet.
I also was waiting for like that, 11th hour reveal that he is also a member of the Resistance.
Because like we get him letting the Doctor go and kind of like you said, doing the whole like prove me right
Hmm.
type of thing. But I was waiting for like like in um Rise of Skywalker where Huck's like, it was me. I was the one
Yeah.
that was feeding you the information. I was kind of half waiting for that. It just seemed like that was the natural progression of where that was going.
Yeah, he kind of like there's a small bit of like um oh oh my god, I'm blanking on his name and I had it there like 2 seconds ago. Dude from DS9, the tailor.
Garrick.
Garrick, yes, thank you. There's a small bit of Garrick and
Plain simple Garrick.
Small bit of Garrick and Gul Dukat
Mm.
to kind of vibe to him. Like for me, I think he was probably the most enjoyable character in this story from a
Yeah.
performance standpoint. Like he's very intelligent
Mm.
because it's like he uses deductive reasoning to find out the potential traitors and where they're based because he goes, don't just show me the computer readouts. I want to review this for myself.
Yeah.
Um, and he also realizes that in a world with an all powerful regime, you still catch more flies with honey.
Mm.
Like and as you say, like he kind of goes from the Dalek esque, way of speaking to very man of the people. With Joe here, have some more grapes here, have some more wine, all this type of stuff. I have to wonder though, if his life was spared by any other means, like okay, we'll say that he has that conversation with the Doctor, like
Mm.
everything happens in accordance, but rather than the Doctor sparing his life or
Mm.
getting the rebels to spare his life, like he's out of the room, he's somewhere else, and the rebels rescue the Doctor and Joe, and they just flake away. Would he still have allowed the Doctor and Joe to go back into the past based on their conversations?
I don't know. That's the interesting thing because that was the turning point for him.
Yeah.
Which I think was not only that the Doctor asked them to not kill him, but the fact that they went along with it. Like he is their arch nemesis, and they didn't kill him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he would have.
Because he said he made it a point to kind of say we as controllers have made sure that humanity has some semblance of life.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, no, is that what you firmly believe,
Mm.
or are you just using it as a sort of a fucking screen for the fact that you actually enjoy being in power?
Yeah, like we talked about who he corresponds to in Deep Space Nine. Do you know? Another character that he kind of reminds me of in some ways is Gata from Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
During
The colonial
during
occupation.
during the occupation of New
New
Caprica,
Caprica. Yeah.
where you had Gata trying to work from the inside, but still was tried as a collaborator.
Yeah.
And he kind of reminds me a bit of Gata in that respect. That I think with Gata, it wasn't quite as bad. It didn't run for quite as long, but I think the controller had grown up in an environment where he was told he was doing what was best for humanity.
Yeah.
And he believed it 110%. And he wasn't trying to be evil.
Yeah. No, it's just, but that's the thing. It's like humanity, like what humanity to be right now.
Mm.
If you were and with all the wealth and everything that you have, or wealth, but you still have a boot at the back of your neck.
Mm.
If you're told that everything can be changed, and you obviously you're not going to realize it, but you could grow up in a world where now this shit happens. It's like, are you going to help or are you going to hinder?
Yeah. An interesting thing. What did you think of the acting for him? Because I think the fact that he was able to turn on a dial was very disconcerting and stuff.
I think that he is probably, for the guest cast, he's the best performance hands down.
Barry hated it.
Really?
He thought it was too overdone. That a lot of his acting was as if he was acting on a stage where you have to project, and he thought it was too overdone.
Well, like even in like the only other thing I've seen him in is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and even then he's one of those guys that likes to kind of roll the R's a small bit and like really likes to enunciate each word. I just thought that was his particular style.
Yeah, no, it seems Barry wasn't a big fan of it, but I actually quite enjoyed his performance.
I think it was, like as I said, it was the best performance from everyone, hands down.
Yeah, I think your one who played in that would probably come second for me. Because I think particularly knowing the fact that they had very little acting direction, I think she handled her own fairly well with that.
She did.
But yeah, it's interesting that Barry wasn't a fan of the performance.
Before we go on, Michael Craze is the name of the guy that played Ben. I just remembered it there.
I was getting Michael Craze and Fraser Hines confused.
Yeah.
I was like, Michael Fraze? That's not a fucking thing.
Michael Fraze. So we now go on to the undisputed villains of the piece. So we have the Ogrons and we have the Daleks. Who do you mean we have
first? The Proto-Klingons? And by Proto-Klingons, I mean the Proto-Next Generation Klingons. And by Proto-Next Generation Klingons, I mean dumb Proto-Next Generation Klingons.
I've actually labelled them as Planet of the Urukai Klingons because their armour looks like the gorillas from Planet of the Apes, and they also look like a mix between Urukai and Klingons.
They do indeed.
Yes.
I would have liked to have seen more from them. Unfortunately, because of the way the Daleks have to move in open fields, which is slowly, and because of how that motorized trike went like 3 miles an hour, and you could tell it was 3 miles an hour, they come across really badly. Do you know? I don't mind them being of perhaps limited intelligence, in comparison to humans and Daleks, or whatever. I don't mind that so much. But they're meant to be intimidating and they're meant to be fear-inducing. But they run like a toddler.
But like, and that's the thing is like, again, from the book, I was let down because like the portrayal of them here is very inconsistent. So like, if we're meant to believe that the trike is fast, they're fast enough to keep up with it. But then when they come back into the 20th century, they're like, even though there's a lot of them, they're all like lumbering clods. Like, okay, I get for the what the impact of the visual was meant to be, that they're walking side by side with the Daleks. But Jesus Christ, lads, you're under fire. Surely you have like enough guys to fucking run forward, because you've proven yourselves in accordance with what we've seen with the trike to be fast enough to cover the ground. We've also as well that like the Doctor can take one of them on very easily until he can't. And like that was a thing where it was like, I remember when he meets the very first Ogron in the book, he tries to do his Venusian Aikido, and he basically describes it as hitting like a brick wall, in the sense of he bounces off it. And I think like in the book they're described as more gorilla-like. So again, like you, I like the idea. I actually preferred them to the Robo-Men, and even though I like the Robo-Men, I prefer this aspect of stuff, like them as a fucking hired muscle type thing. But they were just really inconsistently presented here. Yeah.
And then we have the Daleks themselves. Now, one thing I will say is, I think I've discussed it before, I don't like it when the Daleks have minions.
Yeah.
Daleks shouldn't need minions. But in this case, they only had 3 Daleks. So, you know.
What if the Daleks had the actual minions from Despicable Me?
I would hate them even more.
How can you hate the minions?
They're so annoying. They were fine for one film. Then it became too much.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyway, back to the Daleks. Again, I'm going to quote from the DVD here. Barry Letts was very upset with how the Daleks were presented. Like this This had 10 million viewers, which is insane. Nowadays, that would be like front page news if you had 10 million viewers watching live.
Yeah.
And he's like, 10 million viewers to watch 3 Daleks. And he made the point that he's like, had you shot it better, you could have made it out that there were 15 Daleks, 20 Daleks. If you think about The Chase, or if you think about any other time we've seen Daleks, The Chase in particular, where they were all coming out of the time ship, which was the same 3 guys just running around in a fucking circle until they decided, okay, that's enough, and then just the guy didn't go back to the back of the line.
Or in the original screen caps from Power of the Daleks, you just have a painted backboard with them kind of like in ranks.
Yeah, like there's ways that they could have made them more. However, right, I've said it before, you and I try not to judge the story too much on the financial limitations of the time.
That is very true.
I think this is a little bit of financial limitation and poor directing, if I'm honest.
I'll definitely put my hands down to the poor directing. Financial limitations, like as I said, there's an awful lot of characters here. There's an awful lot of extras. Like, because if you think about it, there's a huge contingent of unit troops, huge contingent of Ogrons, huge contingent of
Daleks are expensive to make.
Yeah, but like
in terms of the Dalek side of things.
Yeah.
Specifically. What I find interesting with the Daleks here is how they choose to use time travel. Because Daleks have had time travel since The Chase, which was years ago, in 1970s time. But I find it interesting that they master time travel, and they decide, do you know what? We failed to take over Earth in 2159.
Was it 64? In TV story, I think it's 64.
Okay, whatever.
64.
So they failed in that endeavor, and so they decided to go back and to find a moment in time that they can take advantage of. And I find it very interesting. It makes me wonder if the reason why they didn't let the controller go with the gorillas is because they knew what started the war. And they were just waiting for confirmation that this was the right point in time, this is the right event that kicked it off. And they couldn't have the controller go back in case he figured it out and stopped it.
Yeah.
So that's why the gorillas always went. It's why in the end they went themselves, and they were like, the house has to blow up. Because if the house doesn't blow up, the war doesn't start, in their minds. So I think that's a really interesting idea, because it also shows that they haven't really understood time travel in many ways. Do you know? That they took advantage of one particular moment in time, but then they're trying so desperately to hold on to it.
Yeah.
And to make sure that it happens the exact way they want it to happen. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was an interesting way for the characters to be done. I don't like them using the Ogrons. I don't mind them using the controller. That's fine. I don't like them using the Ogrons. But I think when you consider the fact that this story was originally written without them even in it, they don't do too badly for being shoehorned at the end.
Yeah, because like it's weird though, because like the Gold Dalek says that humans are untrustworthy.
Yeah.
Yet you don't seem to have any qualms about using them to run your slave workforce.
True, but then they also have the Ogrons as well.
Yeah.
Like even the controller said, I need more human security forces. And they're like, no. They have a few humans in key positions. And that's it.
Like, yeah, because like, if you think about like, in, what was it, in Dalek Invasion of Earth, they just use the Robo-Men, which they convert themselves. And yeah, so like here is a case of like, okay, we learned from the previous time, so we will use a muscle force to oversee the human force that we have overseeing the human force. Yeah,
I mean, the Ogre, if we're going back to the fucking Deep Space Nine analogy, the Ogrons here are a bit like the
Jem'Hadar.
The Jem'Hadar. But it made sense for the founders to use the Jem'Hadar.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make sense for the Daleks. Except that they don't want to get their wheels dirty. No?
I was about to say you can't really say hands because they don't have hands.
No, I was going to say whisk. It was whisker
Yeah.
wheels. I went wheels. That they don't want to be the ones who have to oversee everything. But the three of them sat in that room. That's essentially what they're doing. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was. I think the Daleks were grand.
Yeah, but there's just nothing new from them here.
No.
Like there is nothing new. And like I think we have reached the point where, like, because I had said like that every time we saw the Daleks, I think up until probably Power and inclusive of Power, they always brought something new to the table.
Although Evil had the big tool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sorry. Yeah. It had Jabba the Dalek. There we go.
Yeah. I think in this one, I think the only thing that is maybe new is how they want to manipulate time as opposed to travel through it like they did in the chase.
Yeah.
But since we've already seen them travel through time in the chase, I don't think it has as big an impact here.
I think this is a case of actually traveling through time to make a, because like previously their attempts to travel through time were to kill the Doctor.
Yeah, but then also do the human experimentation thing in Evil.
But
this is actually trying to manipulate time.
Yeah.
Which I think would have worked better if we hadn't already seen them use time travel twice before.
Definitely. Okay, we've definitely got it working this time. Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Ah, shit, they stole it. God damn it. So, an interesting discussion. I'm curious to see now what your overall score is going to be. So, in this section, we give our thoughts on the story as a whole. We give our score out of 5. Paddy, do you want to go first?
I would indeed. So, first thing I must say, Yates is a prick. Rank has its privileges. Rank will have my foot up your ass. You he stole food from Benton, then acted as if it was nothing. Nothing.
Also, he treated Benton like shit.
He did. He fucking treated like
I would. Okay, right. We didn't discuss Yates as a character because Yates doesn't do much. All he does is that RHIP bullshit. But I don't like Yates. I would hate. Imagine having to report to Yates.
Yeah.
Because he comes across as the guy who takes credit for all your ideas and who treats you like shit.
And we've all worked with people like that at some point in time.
Yeah. No.
But on to the actual story as a whole. So, as I said, I read the novelization of this years ago. And I have to say, the novelization is better than the televised version.
Okay.
Now, normally, in my experience anyway, I have seen television or film versions of pre-established books. And sometimes, sometimes the books are better, and sometimes the movies and TV shows are better. Here is a case of where we have a novelization of a television or film, and the book far outshines it. Like you gave me the Crusades, and I loved it, and it added some very nice character moments, and added some very nice story points. But I wouldn't say that it was better than the television version because I thought the television version was amazing. Here, I think that the book is the way to go for this particular story because it really gets across the struggle. It actually really gets across like how shit life is in the 22nd century for humanity. As I said, I love the fever state of Shura's like internal monologue. I love that, and just the Daleks and the Ogrons are presented as more of a threat. And as you said, like the big battle is actually a big battle. It's great. I love the concept of the story. I really do. Like you get like there's huge Terminator vibes from it because, and I like how they explain how time travel works in the sense of you went back to ensure an event doesn't happen, and by doing that, you've ensured that it does happen. They kind of like in Terminator where Kyle Reese is sent back to protect Sarah and ends up conceiving John, the guy who sent him back in the first place. So I like that. Thought the Controller was a very interesting character. I like seeing characters like him. The guys that are they're chaotic neutral type thing. the rest of it, and I liked the Doctor. I liked seeing, he was like, as you said, like enemy of the world. Okay, I want all the facts before I make a decision as to what to do, and then it's I agree with the goal. I just do not like how you want to achieve that goal. Um, and it's like there was also a thing like there where we know that the Doctor doesn't like violence,
Mm.
or he doesn't. He acts in self defense the majority of the time. And I thought about that when he runs outside and he shoots one of the Ogrons, and it's like, okay, obviously it's in a scenario of self defense. Yet he does pause and take aim.
That is another controversial thing
Yeah,
in this story. So, again, Barry Letts didn't like that
yeah,
because of the way the Ogrons. No, it's meant to be the Ogron was going to attack the Doctor,
yeah,
and the Doctor shot first
yeah,
in self defense because he
Mhm.
knows that those weapons will disintegrate you.
yeah.
But it doesn't even look like the Ogron raised his weapon.
No, it is like he does kind of stop and he does the whole squint-eyed aim
Mm.
shoot business. So I was like, that was not the best.
That was a misdirection, definitely.
Yeah. So like I just think everything else was just very rushed and underdeveloped.
Mm.
So I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5.
Okay.
So how about your scoring of this story?
Terminator was a great movie. This is a grand story. Grand in the it's alright. Not grand in the big over the top thing because we've already established that's not. I agree with you. Fuck you, Yates, you prick. It's interesting to see Doctor Who tackle time paradoxes in this way because we haven't really seen this concept explored too much, if at all, really up to now. Because if you think about the two examples I could think of that kind of lent into this were the Aztecs.
Mm-hmm.
We can't change history, not one line.
Yeah.
And the massacre, where the Doctor just left with Stephen and was kind of like, there's nothing I can do about that. It happened.
What about the Space Museum?
Yeah, I suppose the Space Museum is the only other time that this, but that was a more controlled environment.
Yeah.
That wasn't them traveling through time to do something. That was they were displaced from time.
Yeah.
Whereas this is the first time we actually see time travel. And yeah, it is essentially the Terminator type thing where they try to go back in time to prevent the thing from happening, only to find out that they were the cause of the thing happening. Like you said, Reese went back to protect John Connor, only to then father John Connor, and because the Terminator was there and they destroyed the Terminator, then if we go to the next movie in Terminator 2, they use the arm that was left from the original thing, blah, blah, blah.
So I just have Futurama going through my head now, where like Fry goes back in time and accidentally kills who he thought was his grandfather, and then he ends up grandfathering himself.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing for Doctor Who to play with because they've always kind of veered away from paradoxes.
Yeah.
And like, a lot of people, comment that like, did Star Trek rip off the Cybermen when it came to the Borg? You have the same thing here. Like a similar type of story was done in it was Outer Limits or Twilight Zone or something. And the guy who wrote that ended up suing James Cameron for Terminator because it was so fucking similar. And that didn't happen here. The BBC never sued James Cameron because, as Terrence Dicks makes the point, that like this isn't a new concept in science fiction.
No.
It may not be one that was explored much on TV up until that point, but this is a long-running science fiction trope in books for ages. So I think it's great that we're actually starting to see that in Who, because it's really starting to bring in this idea of fixed points.
Yeah, there you've got like you're bringing in terminology like temporal paradoxes and the Blinovich limitation effect.
Yeah. All of that I think is really, really super interesting. I do agree with the cast that the number of Daleks was a bit crap. The Ogrons weren't all that much better. I think the idea that the Daleks had, I thought that was interesting from a Dalek perspective of them taking their activities up to the level of manipulating time to meet their ends. So not only can they travel through time, but they can now manipulate it to get the outcome that they want. I thought that was really interesting. I thought the controller was great. I thought the doctor was very good. I thought the humanity of the brigadier came across really well.
Mm-hmm.
But all together, and I, as we've discussed it, I've dropped it down. I originally gave it a 3. Because like it's grand, it's middle of the road. But really, the more we've discussed it, and I watched the making of after I gave it the score. The directing is just so bad. It's not the gunfighter's bad with that fucking song, but like everything is just so flat by a lot of the actors, particularly a lot of the supporting cast, with the exception of the 2 that we've mentioned. Like Anat was good on her own, relatively speaking, and the controller was fine by himself, but like the women who were working with the controller speaking like Daleks, what the fuck was that about?
Yeah.
Do you know, the way the Ogrons moved, even the way the Ogrons spoke. So the first time we see the Ogrons speaking to the controller, one of them speaks in a kind of stilted Dalek-y type of way.
Yeah.
Which is meant to get across the fact that he's not fully clued in upstairs. But then the second Ogron is like, no issues. And you could tell that he was like, I'm not fucking doing that.
Isn't he saying, I obey?
Yeah. And, like, the first one was, like, very much, okay, they speak like the Daleks, which makes sense, because they're the Daleks' fucking force. And the second one was kind of like, I'm not fucking doing that. And he just speaks like a normal fucking person.
No, just like, why don't we tell him all those Ogrons who sent on to the other side of the moon came back super intelligent? I was like, no, I don't think we should be telling them that.
Yeah, so that I think was shit. And for that reason, I think giving it a 3 would be unfair to the other stories that we have ranked
as a 3.
As a 3. So, like, bearing in mind, Mind of Evil was a 3 for me. Claws of Axos was a 3 for me. And this doesn't really rank up with either of those. I think it's a good continuation of Mind of Evil. I will say that. But I would agree with you. For me, this is a 2.5, and that may be being a bit generous.
Yeah, there are certain stories that we've covered, which is like, obviously, when you see one of your favorite TV shows on television, you're like, oh, I'll, sit down and I'll watch it. But obviously, you're not, like, there's some episodes in that show that you're not, it's like, nah, I'm good, I'll flip on.
Yeah.
I think Day of the Daleks might be one of those.
Yeah, which is interesting because a lot of fans really like Day of the Daleks. It has the most commercial releases of any story. It was on VHS, it was on Laserdisc, it had multiple versions on VHS. It's on DVD and whatever. I just think that it was... Do you know what? The only thing I can chalk it up to is, no offense to Paul Bernard, it was poorly directed.
Yes, I agree.
And, we've seen them make a dozen Daleks out of 3. We've seen them make the most random fucking alien creatures seem believable.
Like, we've even seen, like, a great fight sequence with a limited number of things in terms of, like, the mechanoids versus the Daleks.
Yeah. Or even, like, I was thinking about, like, the fight scene at the end. If you remove the Daleks from the equation.
Yeah.
No point shooting the Daleks, just fucking avoid them. Right? As in, that would be... If you only had the 3 Daleks, there's no point in the humans attacking the Daleks. Just avoid them. Right? But if you think about the fight between the Ogrons and the humans, like, fucking Ambassadors of Death. The warehouse fight.
Yeah.
That was fucking brilliant.
That was amazing.
That was the unit soldiers, and I mean, like, we've had great unit fights. I was like, where the fuck was that here? Like,
and even if you want to go with the Mind of Evil, the gunfight in the courtyard.
Yeah, like, we've seen examples of that. Like, where was that here? Do you know? And that falls on the direction, I think. Now, like I said, Paul Bernard does direct more. The Time Monster and the Frontier of Space. I haven't seen either of those. So it's going to be interesting for me to see if I have a different take on those from a directing point of view.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he works with Roger Delgado, because Roger Delgado is in both of those.
That'll be interesting. So 2.5 first season opener. Where is that ranking? The Dominators was also 2.5.
Galaxy 4 was also
Galaxy
2.5.
4 was also 2.5. Yeah, so it's tied for bottom with
bottom
with Galaxy 4 and the Dominators. Would I say it's better than those two? Maybe. But still not great though.
And that's also interesting because we have a one from each Doctor now. In terms of seasons.
We do. Actually, I'm curious now. So that was season 3, and then
season 6, and season 9.
It's their third season.
Yeah.
What the hell?
And actually, speaking of third season, this episode has gone live on Monday, November the 1st, one day after Jodie Whittaker's final season has started.
This is true.
Yes,
this is true.
Season 13.
It's a common.
Yep, which will be, for our listeners, will be a long time coming before we reach that.
5 years away.
Because, because again, I did like that, count where it's like episodes versus stories. So, like, I think we're actually at just past a third of the way. Like, we've 1/3 of the episodes covered. So yeah, 2/3 left to go, but like we're still like way behind on stories because this is story number 60 out of 297.
Yeah, Jodie, you're going to be a while.
Yeah.
But what do we have next week, Paddy?
So next week we have a trip off-world again for Jo, where she gets to see a alien race with a funky hairstyle and a terrible secret in the Curse of Peladon.
Which also has one of my favourite musical parts from all of Doctor Who.
Yep. So to see all this, tune in next week.
Or to hear us, because no one actually watches us, but okay.
They can visualize. Bye.